Vicki Lawrence joined the Carol Burnett Show at the age of 17. Everyone else had more experience, training, and age. She wasn't. However, there was more to what transpired in those studios than age. Vicki was subject to Carol Burnett's severe regulations in a different way. She once acted out of character while rehearsing. Vicki was struck speechless and embarrassed by Carol's lecture, which she delivered after calling the entire cast to the center of the stage. The worst thing wasn't that. She was purposefully put to the test by the authors with scenarios that were implausible. She suffered from excruciating hives that covered half of her body as a result of Tim Conway hiding her scripts. The true shock, however, was the hush that ensued for 5 years. On March 26, 1949, Vicki Lawrence was born in Englewood, California, a small community close to Los Angeles. Howard, her father, was deeply scarred by his history. In order to avoid growing dangers, his Jewish family departed Austria in the 1930s and arrived in America via Ellis Island. Howard put a lot of effort into earning his CPA certification, yet despite his credentials, he wasn't accepted anywhere. When they sought his last name, people canceled meetings. Some refused to shake his hand at all. Annalene Lloyd, his wife, also had German Jewish ancestry. When she became a devout Christian Scientist, however, she abandoned that. Thus, there were no medical professionals present. Not even aspirin. Vicki's mother simply prayed whenever she became ill. Their home was full with laughter despite its lack of possessions. Vicki was performing skits by the time she was 5 years old. She would take an old coat, make a microphone out of a broom, and begin imitating famous people like Carol Burnett. Her stage was the living room. She enjoyed making her folks chuckle. She occasionally received invitations to perform at gatherings hosted by her neighbors. She was observed by others, but there was also a more serious issue at hand. Their last name had caused too much animosity, according to her father. He wished that neither Vicki nor her brother would have to face the same walls as they grew up. Thus, he made a decision in the 1950s. He gave them the last name Lawrence instead of Axelrod. At first, Vicki didn't get it. It was like hiding. She discovered it was survival years later. Vicki's voice began to stand out at school. She practiced harmonies, joined neighborhood singing groups, and improved each week. She performed over the rainbow in a talent show when she was 10 years old. The crowd was deeply affected by the emotion in her powerful voice. A standing ovation was given to her. Something was ingrained in her that night. She knew she wanted a career in show industry, but she had no idea how it would come to pass. Things weren't easy at home. Silence and faith were used to deal with illnesses. Just silence, prayer, and hope, no medication. Vicki endured a series of fevers without receiving any medical attention. She subsequently linked those untreated childhood episodes to some of her lasting health problems, such as persistent hives. She discovered what it meant to persevere while lying in bed trembling from a fever. She drifted away from church doctrine as she grew older. She never lost the ability to calmly bear suffering, though, thanks to that early instruction. She was more than a regular student by the time she arrived to Morningside High School. She was a formidable force. In addition to leading the cheer squad, choreographing rally routines, and even incorporating jazz-style motions she had seen at clubs into the routines, she graduated in 1967 as the class valedictorian. Before she was even a star, her classmates referred to her as such. Without a doubt, she was going to win. Her rallies were even covered by the local media. She could lead a cheerleading squad with one hand, wield a microphone with the other, and ace a scientific test the following morning. However, she didn't always have really distinct dreams. Vicki's initial career goal was to become a dental hygienist. Because she loved her dentist and believed the work sounded neat and safe, she enrolled in pre-dental studies. Then something took place. She was asked to sing the national anthem at a Lakers game after joining the school's glee club. She caught the attention of talent scouts somewhere in the stands. After that, they came up to her and said she had stage presence. Everything was turned upside down by that unexpected moment. Perhaps quiet workspaces and immaculate teeth weren't her calling. Perhaps the future of her voice was different. She competed in the Miss Fireball pageant, a local beauty competition, that same year. A chain of regional petrol stations operated it. She performed a daring comedic imitation of Lucille Ball at the talent show. It was successful. She took home $500 and the contest. In 1967, real money for a teenager. It also invited her to join a national singing group called the Young Americans. Doors were beginning to open. Vicki, however, didn't wait for approval. She began sneaking out to try out for advertisements when she was 17. She kept everything a secret because she knew her strict parents wouldn't approve. She was hired for a local milk commercial after one of those auditions. Without a word, she danced, got paid, and put the money away. She proved she could make it with that silent disobedience. She didn't require clearance from anyone. The letter then arrived. She wrote a fan letter to Carol Burnett while she was still a high school student. She enclosed a newspaper clipping announcing her victory in a beauty contest, along with a picture of herself costumed as one of Burnett's TV characters. Carol Burnett not only replied, but she also hung the picture on the wall of her dressing room, something she never expected. After that, she went to see Vicki live. Carol was the one who put the Miss Fireball crown on Vicki's head after she won. And everything changed that night. She received an audition invitation from Carol in 1967. Vicki was put through a screen test despite her lack of professional acting experience. A professional soap actress was among her rivals. Vicki, however, stole the show when the producers asked the two women to pretend to fight like sisters. She felt like Carol's own sister because of her rapid banter, natural teasing, and improvisational skills. She was cast. On September 11, 1967, she landed her first acting role in the Carol Burnett Show's inaugural episode. She was 18. In a single night, she had to commit 12 complete pages of the script to memory. No cue cards, no second takes. In front of over 1,000 people, she took the stage and performed flawlessly. She demonstrated more than just her talent in that moment. It put her in the annals of television. She attempted to reconcile her newfound celebrity with her studies. Although the play ran for 30 weeks a year, she enrolled in UCLA's theater arts program. Her days began before dawn as she hurried from campus to the studio for 5-hour rehearsals, rewriting sketches, and changing costumes. She studied comedy every day with such luminaries as Harvey Korman and Tim Conway. She was unable to continue living a double life after 2 years. She left because she was already learning from the top professionals in the field, not because she wasn't intelligent. She didn't have an easy time with the writers. They tested her because they didn't trust a teenage newbie. To test her ability to remain in character, they assigned her silent parts. In one sketch, Harvey Korman improvised constant pandemonium around her as she sat quietly at a dinner table. They desired for her to shatter. She didn't. More than any monologue, those silent moments helped her timing. She flew into Vietnam in 1968, a year after becoming famous, as part of a USO tour with Johnny Grant. She was just 19. In a sense, they did, as she demonstrated one evening when she said, "These boots are made for walking in front of 5,000 troops packed into a hot makeshift tent city." They screamed, clapped, and cheered like their lives depended on it. She witnessed the turmoil, the panic, and the injured offstage. It caused her to mature more quickly than fame could. Vicki Lawrence joined the Carol Burnett Show in 1967 at the age of 17. The others were all older, more experienced, and more skilled. She had to keep up even though she wasn't. Not even during rehearsals did Carol Burnett permit anyone to deviate from the character. Vicki once burst out laughing during a somber sketch. Carol put an end to it all. With the producers observing, she summoned the entire cast to the middle of the stage and delivered a severe disciplinary speech. Recognizing that this was more than just a job, Vicki stood there dumbfounded and ashamed. It was war. She couldn't simply be humorous. She needed to live. She was somewhat scarred by the experience, but she also became more resilient. From that point on, every glance, cue, and phrase had to land. She remained silent despite the mounting pressure, determined to prove herself worthy of being in that room full of giants. She wasn't supposed to have the unused character. Carol was the intended recipient. However, Vicki's delivery altered everything. "Life say and so are you" was a nasty line that didn't sound written when Vicki spoke it. It had a living sound. The authors paid attention. The audience did as well. Carol did the same. Vicki wasn't a gag because of her resentment. It was a noisy, twisted mirror, and it did its job. Unused became a mainstay. People prepared for the emotional gut hit each time she entered that filthy set and opened her mouth. Vicki was no longer merely the young person who needed to be watched, and the sketch completely changed the show's flow. She was the one who stole scenes, anchored routines, and took responsibility for the suffering that went into the jokes. Vicki Lawrence received her first Emmy nomination in 1976. It wasn't the sheer joy it should have been. She didn't feel like she fit in. Each of the other nominees that year had accolades, theater credits, drama skills, and prominence. She had a sketch program and spent years portraying the loudmouth, the southern mess, and the brat. Vicki excused herself, went to her dressing room, locked the door, and sobbed when Rue Lanahan prevailed instead. Although she was aware of her excellent job, she secretly believed that her inclusion on the list was a mistake. For years, she had been surrounded by legends and had pretended to be one of them. This served as a reminder that perhaps she wasn't. A nomination did not eliminate that kind of uncertainty. It only became more acute. There were 11 seasons of the show. It's more than 250 episodes. Sketch after sketch, week after week. Tim Conway gained notoriety for his improvisations. Vicki had to match his every move, even if she couldn't predict what he would do. In order to remain in the scenario, she occasionally had to change her lines on the spot. Her body eventually began to feel the effects of stress in 1972. Her arms and neck were covered in a strong breakout of hives. She was unable to rest or fall asleep. Even before she put on her outfit, she would occasionally be itching. However, she continued. She did it every time. No time was wasted by the cameras. And someone else would take her place if she ever broke. Carol Burnett was more than just her supervisor. She developed into a mentor, a mother figure, and a guardian. To assist Vicki meet the standards of Hollywood, she offered her a wardrobe of 50 unique dresses. But Carol has her own set of rules. One of them was severe. Don't date your coworkers. It was broken by Vicki. She was in a relationship with one of the authors. Carol learned. Backstage, it resulted in a quiet but heated altercation. Carol wasn't merely angry. She felt let down. She reminded Vicki of her efforts to keep her safe. That disappointment weighed heavily on Vicki, who was caught between youth and guidance. It has nothing to do with a boy. Trust was at issue. On how difficult it was to strike a balance between discipline, friendship, and growing up in public. Something unexpected occurred in 1972. At a cast party, Vicki was seen singing beside music producer Gary Clean. In a matter of days, he signed her to Bell Records. She spent 8 exhausting hours recording the night the lights went out in Georgia that same year. It was at the top of the Billboard Hot 100 by January 6, 1973. It sold over 1 million copies and was on the charts for nearly 20 weeks. It was unbelievable. A TV comedian is currently at the top of the charts. It got gold in May of 1973. That year, she became the first well-known actress to achieve such a success. However, Vicki started to feel that success in music came with a different type of pain, one she hadn't prepared for, as the cameras followed and the pressure increased. In July 1973, her debut album was released. More than 2 million copies were sold worldwide. However, by the end of the same year, she began to lose her voice. Her vocal cords had developed nodules. The physicians advised her to cease and get surgery. She didn't. She was brought up in a Christian scientific environment and preferred prayer to medicine. She continued to perform and take risks until the pain became unbearable in 1974. At last, she caved. She was forced to reconsider her pursuit of stardom after the incident. Her body was suddenly demonstrating that she had everything to lose. Vicki had an appearance on The Tonight Show in April 1973. Millions watched as she sang, joked, and laughed with Johnny Carson. Her album soared back to the top of the charts. However, something darker started behind the cameras. She began to receive hundreds of letters, many of them from unrestrained enthusiasts. In Los Angeles, one of them broke into her hotel room. She was by herself. They called security. The fear persisted even after the stalker fled. The stage and lights of fame had vanished. Vulnerability was the issue. It was the uncertainty of who might be in the next room. It should have been a communal celebration of the gold record. Rather, it created friction. Carol Burnett cautioned her. She would avoid acting in favor of music. Vicki wanted more, but she suggested that she remain grounded. She decided to take a break from the show for a while to travel Europe. The distance between them grew. Carol thought it was careless. Vicki saw it as self-reliance. Mentor and protégé were at odds for the first time. Even after the cheering subsided, the rift in their relationship persisted. Her follow-up song, Delta Dawn, was widely popular by the beginning of 1974. It stagnated at number 40 despite being hammered by radio stations. The initial hit's enchantment was lost. Upbeat, accessible pop was what record executives sought. Vicki desired something more profound and rich. They fought each other. The music choices dwindled by the middle of 1974. Just silence, no more chatter, no hits. She turned to go back to TV and went away. The arc was hefty, short, and shining. It ended with tiredness rather than failure. The date of her marriage to Bobby Russell was June 29, 1972. They believed it would be glitzy. However, when Russell snapped at fans who wanted Vicki's autograph, the honeymoon at LAX came to an end. He yelled and said she was being ostentatious. Security had to intervene. Everyone in the terminal stared. It was unlucky. One that trailed them back to their house. It ended 18 months later. The divorce was filed in January 1974. Russell was rumored to have cheated. Late-night gossip and hotel stories were published by Nashville tabloids. He did not refute it. He just replied that he felt insignificant because of her prominence. She refrained from arguing. The divorce was harsh, messy, and widely publicized. It made her a tabloid headline instead than a growing celebrity. She couldn't stop it, but she didn't want that. Next up was Burnett Show makeup artist Al Schultz. Shouting from a dressing room window, Carol personally introduced them. Vicki said nothing. Too much agony from the previous encounter. In 1974, they took a plane to Vegas on November 16. Just a few friends, no family, no press. The wedding took place in a tiny chapel. It wasn't until later that his parents found out. At last, it was quiet, private, and hers. On May 3, 1975, their daughter Courtney was born. But there was a price for bliss. Vicki was depressed after giving birth. She had trouble sleeping, sobbed with the infant, and experienced stress rashes right before tapings. She would appear in costume, grin broadly, and then fall apart in the background. If they did, they didn't ask, or nobody knew. She simply continued. She gave birth to her son, Garrett, on July 1, 1977, 2 years later. She was simultaneously filming Mama's Family and The Carol Burnett Show. In between shots, she breastfed while occasionally wearing her disguise and wig. Al also put in 14-hour workdays. They seldom ever saw one another. In silence, they headed to counseling. There are only 2 people attempting to survive the machine, no cameras, no headlines. Tim Conway made headlines in 1975 with a crazy story about a circus elephant. He kept the fact that he planned it a secret. Laughing, the cast broke. Vicki didn't. She felt irritated. Informed her spouse. He answered, "Get him." Then, in the middle of the following scene, she yelled, "I hate elephants." This broke the moment. Carol was the only one who acted out of character. In any case, it was broadcast. The audience adored it. Ratings increased by 15%. At that point, Mama ceased to be a drawing and began to become a force, although she was still uneasy. The script was once hidden by Tim Conway. She had to live for 10 minutes and go out blind. She barely succeeded. She wasn't Tim after crying. Although she had no improv training, she finally began to push back after learning. Her strength remained, but so did the uneasiness. Uneasiness debuted as a full-length special in 1982. In one take, Vicki slapped Harvey Korman because she was playing Mama so fiercely. CBS went into a panic. It went too far, they believed. They discussed chopping it. She retaliated. Claimed Mama would behave that way. People adored it when it aired uncensored. Her career was once again changed by that one special. She lost all 5 of her Emmy nominations. Hearing producers mumble that she would never succeed on her own, however, hurt much more. After listening, she made a case for Mama's Family. The program was picked up. It ran for hundreds of episodes over several years. For the child who laughed during rehearsal, it's not awful. When Vicki Lawrence started Mama's Family in 1983, she was doing more than just penning the Carol Burnett Show's coattails. For millions of American homes, she was creating something loud, obstinate, and strangely familiar. Over 20 million people watched it during its first week of broadcasting. NBC's audacious decision to acquire 100 episodes in advance demonstrated their confidence in this raspy-voiced matriarch. Thelma Harper had abruptly transformed into a full-bodied sitcom character, cranky and sharp-tongued but rooted in something deeper, after once cracking one-liners in brief sketches. Viewers had been persuaded by Vicki that this was not another spin-off. It was a skewed yet honest household mirror. However, she battled for that mirror's appearance from the beginning. In one early draft, Mama and her brother-in-law were romantically linked. After reading it, Vicki shut it and strode inside the writer's room. She informed them that it was being rewritten without asking. The ridiculousness of sitcoms didn't bother her. She didn't sign up for that show. She had the support of her former father-in-law and executive producer Joe Hamilton. The plot was rewritten, the roughness was retained, and the shock was removed. Mama's morals were off limits after that. The show's core was defined by the line that Vicki had drawn. Vicki was not amenable to the network's decision to move production from CBS Stage 33, the same location where the Carol Burnett Show had flourished, to KTLA in order to save money. Legacy was the meaning of Stage 33. She declined to attend the first table read since KTLA meant taking shortcuts. Waiting, the cast sat. She didn't enter. Her quiet was more powerful than her words. She made her point, but the atmosphere remained uncomfortable for weeks after. For her, this was more than simply employment. Every scene had a hint of revolt, pride, and recollection. Producers hired Rue Lanahan and Betty White in 1983. It had a golden sound. Top billing was what Betty desired. Some people were offended by that. The walls of the studio were alive with ego, and tempers began to flare. Vicki began throwing cast dinners because she realized the show couldn't withstand a diva standoff. Peace, plates, one table, and no cameras. The tension broke slowly. The cast started to solidify. Vicki did more than simply portray Mama on TV. In real life, she played the role of peacemaker, softening edges where scripts were unable to. However, NBC later canceled. After only 2 seasons, Mama's Family was canceled in 1984. Vicki's earnings per episode were $50,000. Although viewers were paying attention, the network reported that ratings were declining. Vicki came out. In interviews and on talk shows, she denounced NBC's choice. They pulled out too early, she added. Then she was proven correct by syndication. The number of replays flew from 1986 forward. The popularity of the show increased. Long after the network had left, viewers continued to watch. They had produced 130 episodes by 1986. Though not all conflicts took place in private, Vicki's intuition had been more keen than the suits. Things weren't as cozy after Carol Burnett and Joe Hamilton got divorced in 1983. Carol considered Vicki's ongoing work on Hamilton's mama's family to be a betrayal. The friendship that had transformed Vicki's life vanished. For 5 years, they didn't speak. Carol refused to give her a call. Vicki's husband, Al Schultz, handled everything. The silence was heavy. When reunion specials happened, they'd hardly mention the freeze. The reality remained unspoken despite hints from Hollywood gossip. Wikipedia even made reference to it. Professional life were impacted by personal trauma. Vicki was also deceived by her own body. She was identified as having chronic idiopathic urticaria in 1972. Stress caused it to flare up, resulting in severe hives that covered more than half of her skin. Sometimes it was intolerable to tape Mama's relatives. She tried everything but medicine, which was discouraged by her Christian Science background. She eventually started receiving Xolair injections in 2005. The results were immediate. For the first time in decades, she felt relief. In interviews, she talked candidly about it. The agony had always existed while living with allergies, but she had managed to maintain her sense of humor. Al Schultz, her husband, had been her silent anchor. He was one of Hollywood's best makeup artists and worked in the background while Vicki was the star. However, the rumors did not spare him either. On the set of Sonny and Cher, he allegedly flirted with Cher, according to tabloids. They alluded to a precarious marriage and conjectured about jealousy. The whispers hurt, but none of it was verified. He remained in the background the entire time. He passed away in 2022 at the age of 82. The public largely recognized the makeup legend as Vicki's husband, quiet legacy, loud love, even though he was only 30 years old and the youngest head of West Coast makeup at CBS. Vicki's personal life was turbulent throughout the 1986 to 1990 syndicated revival of the show. Courtney, her daughter, was a fierce rebel who resisted in ways similar to those Carol Burnett had experienced with her own children. Vicki was shaken by it. For the first time, she began therapy. She described it as eye-opening and terrible. It made her face how her parenthood had been influenced by her celebrity. This was a pivotal moment in her development, according to the Encyclopedia of World Biography. Laughter on screen, reckonings off screen. She had grown tired of live performances by the 1990s. Her soft landing was voice acting. She accepted parts in animated shows such as The Pirates and Peter Pan. Just her voice, no makeup, no cameras. It allowed her to breathe. However, Vicki refused to participate in the 1992 Carol Burnett reunion program. The wound was still open. Nostalgia was what fans desired. Vicki wasn't ready to fake it. The absence was confirmed by IMDb. There was still weight in the silence between them. In 1993, it finally shattered. Vicki's father passed away in 1991, and their grief persisted. Carol Burnett made a public apology at the 1993 Emmys. It took Vicki by surprise when she was performing live. They hugged, teared up. The reunion became a TV special, The Carol Burnett Show. That same year, a reunion was broadcast. It felt warm and gentle, as if nothing had ever gone wrong. Even behind the laughing, though, the years had left their mark. Then came 2025. At 76, Vicki made news once more. She was unexpectedly cast in the second season of Palm Royale. Starring already was Carol Burnett. Vicki's character would be connected to Carol's enigmatic past, according to the show. Carol had asked for her directly. They were collaborating once more after more than 40 years. There was more to the reunion than nostalgia. It was restorative. Forward order to see if the original spark could still illuminate the screen, fans leaned forward. But heartbreak struck again. Al Schultz passed away at their Long Beach home on June 19, 2024. The man who had spent 50 years waiting in the wings was no longer there. He was 82. Their golden anniversary was only a few months away. Vicki turned her sorrow outward. She started advocating for union rights and standing up for makeup artists. Her loss gave others a voice. The industry paid attention to TV insiders' coverage of it. Long before all of this, in the early 2000s, Vicki had introduced a cosmetics brand on HSN. Vicki's Fireball Red lipstick was the most notable success. It brought in more than $1 million in its first year. Because it seemed like her, she had produced something that women adored. Audacious, humorous, and modest. She created the branding, chose the colors, and made her fashion into a business. Not only did the lipstick sell, it made a connection. It's a beauty staple, according to my news to use. She was no longer merely a performer. She was well known. In 2024, she will host the Win, Lose, or Draw reboot while writing her memoir. Still laughing, remembering, and surprising people at the age of 76. She claims that Carol Burnett was responsible for 90% of her career. However, she also admits that she wishes she had spoken up more when it was important. The voice that used to object to reading a table draft is now more audible. Jokes aren't the only thing anymore. It's about what it required to hold the laughing together.